Hello and welcome to Two Blokes in a Cave, a podcast hosted by me, Carlton Sin, a traditional Catholic and part-time philosophy enjoyer, and my good friend Cameron Wright, the resident philosophy expert and future convert to the one true faith, Catholicism. Cameron, thanks a lot for being here. How you going?
Hey, good, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. We'll get you eventually. We have a fantastic conversation today, but before we get into it, I think it might be nice for us to tell you a little bit about ourselves, our journey to this point, why on earth we thought anyone outside our immediate families would want to listen to us, and why ultimately we decided to do a podcast series. So I'll kick it to you first, Cameron.
Yeah, well, I studied an arts degree and I did like a major in philosophy.
Yeah.
So I guess I talk about this stuff, and Carlton and I talk about this sort of miscellaneous philosophical concepts all the time. And in my spare time, I guess I do think about stuff, not academically or intellectually, but just enough to be interesting. So I thought we'd put it down on a recording. That's basically, I guess, the meat and potatoes of it.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. I recall many a conversation we would have back in the poker days. We'd go to the pub with a few friends and we'd get into various conversations that the majority of the group weren't necessarily partaking in, but enjoyed to listen. And we often found ourselves sort of on different sides of various issues and had a good time sort of reasoning those differences out and just sort of discussing why you thought X and I thought Y. I figured if our friendship group immediately thought it was interesting enough to listen to, maybe you never know. Other people might also find it interesting because I certainly enjoy having
not
conversations.
Not everyone wants to talk about that stuff. Like, I mean, I've only got a select few people in life that really want to talk about it. Most of the time, most people go, I don't find this interesting. I go, I find it so interesting. What are you talking about?
This is what I get out of bed for. This is all I was going to bed last night thinking about this.
Yeah.
You want to talk about it?
Interesting,
Okay, cool. So, Two Blokes in a Cave. How did we come up with that sort of title? Whose cave? What cave? Why are we in the cave? What's that about?
Well, I guess... for those of you who don't know, it's a reference for those of you who don't know. It's a reference to Plato's allegory of the cave. And if you do Philosophy 101, it's basically... it's one of the first things that comes up if they're not talking about ethics or other sort of branches of philosophy. They're talking about Plato, and I guess he's the father or the grandfather of most of the philosophical discussion. Is a really, really good jumping point as well of pretty much everything else you're going to learn, because he covers every topic that then comes later with every other philosopher for the next 1,000, 2,000 years. So like he has a few books and a few concepts, and this one's
most famous, you would think.
I guess so. It's just it's definitely up there, but it's something that everyone can relate to, and it's up to interpretation in parts as well, what you take from it. But something you get introduced to, and it's really interesting jumping off point, because you can go anywhere with that example.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's one of the first things. I obviously didn't go to uni to study philosophy. Did go to uni, sort of more the business pathway, I guess, which my old man told me that's how, philosophy's not going to pay the bills. We'll see about that.
I can attest.
But that was one of the first things I guess I started with was, I think it was the Plato's Republic, I think was the first book I read. And obviously that's mostly Socratic dialogues from memory about justice, if I recall correctly. But the cave, to me, was quite a fascinating case study in humanity, because a lot of it, again, my understanding of the cave is, to sort of paraphrase quickly, a quote from Plato would be, those who see beyond the lies of their civilization will never be believed by the masses, let alone understood. I guess what he's saying to me is we're all in the cave. Society tells us certain things, and we believe certain things more out of convenience than maybe that it's true, because without such the basis for which civilization couldn't exist. And to get out of the cave, to be more intellectually enlightened, perhaps, it would be a very isolating experience. You're in the cave. The government is, putting those little sock puppets up and showing you the dancing shadows on the wall, and that is to a large degree, like, that makes life easier. If you go with the sort of majority, it's certainly an easier way to do things, and thinking for yourself is difficult. It's certainly an agonizing thing to do. To be alone with your thoughts, I think, is a good thing, but it's certainly not something that will bring you necessarily like inner peace if you're contemplating the mysteries of the universe or in your place in it. It's quite it can be quite isolating. So to think about things in the sort of the cave itself is, okay, if we're all in the cave, is our goal to leave the cave firstly, and in what areas of our life are we in the cave? Because my sort of little novice take is that there may be, in fact, several caves, and you may be fairly enlightened. For me, for instance, being a traditional Catholic, obviously, boom, very enlightened. And my buddy Cameron clearly still in the cave in that respect, but perhaps in other areas of life, he's far more advanced than me, and I might still be looking at the shadows on the wall thinking this is fantastic. So, is there an element, or is there an argument that being in the cave and having, I guess, not having the burden of free thought for oneself, is there any argument for that as a suitable and happy way to live a life?
Yeah, exactly. I might do a super quick run through of my example of what the cave is, I guess, too. It's an allegory, and it's supposed to be pretty simple. I did a tiny bit of reading up on this to refresh my mind. There's a lot of academic stuff and different interpretations, but it's effectively, if you're all sitting in a cave and there's a fire behind you and you're looking at the wall, you're seeing the shadows or reflections of what is actually happening in the cave on the wall. And if you didn't have any experience outside of that, you'd think that was pure reality. Whereas in general, the truth or knowledge or whatever you want to take from the cave is actually outside the cave. And if you went out there, you'd be blinded by the truth, knowledge, the real reality that is actually the source of the reflections, as opposed to actually the shadows, which you thought were true reality. And I think he's trying to say, what I thought in general, the first thing is like, what is your perception of reality? What is truth? Are you accepting what's coming from you? And like, how much are you, I guess, just accepting your little existence within the cave? And it's a good little analogy because everyone can understand that. Like, you're in a flickering cave, you're just looking at shadows and you think that's reality.
Yep.
But it's not, maybe, according to him. It takes a long time to get your head around it because he goes into a lot of other random
there's
theories later. Yeah.
To your point, I think reading the cave, I think the people are actually prisoners. I think.
Oh, okay.
They're chained to the cave, and then there is someone behind them on the fire that creates the shadows.
I was like manipulating.
I think so. Again, reading directly, but it's all kind of irrelevant. Like, the point is essentially that your perception of reality is probably not correct, and there's many philosophers that came after Plato. I think maybe most famous would be René Descartes, talking about what can you believe? Like, you obviously exist in life. What about life is real that you can tangibly and inexplicably explain to be like, this is absolutely correct, and I know it to be correct because of X, Y, Z scientific sort of reasoning. And the cave sort of kind of blows that open and says, well, is anything real? Or is this all part of, is your entire life closeted from the fullness of the sun, and you are, experiencing the shadows? And there are many, many different ways you could take that. I think having a bit of a laugh earlier about the perhaps multiple caves and being more enlightened in certain areas, and then in many areas of your life where you just are, maybe by virtue of a lack of time, you're just kind of going with the flow, taking what you hear on face value because you don't have the energy to challenge it. And maybe it's much simpler to go with the flow on that than to sit there and really consider, like, what am I doing? Or is this going to negatively affect my life, my relationships, my employment, things like that? So Cameron, are you in the cave?
I mean, I guess so.
I guess we're all in the cave.
I think we're all in the cave. When I first heard this, I always liked Plato because he's kind of like just saying...
It's definitely abstract, isn't it?
Yeah, everything he's saying is basically like, I don't know anything. It's what it comes back to wisdom. Is, I don't really know anything, and I don't really know that I can know anything, and that's what he kind of gets at, and that's what Socrates... That's
a very
basically Socrates. Yeah,
thought process. What is justice? I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, and I like that because I always had I don't feel like it's really
can't solve
possible
the
to
universe.
fully know everything. It's to be very, very, I guess, cocksure. Like, I fully know this 100% thing. I always used to be a little bit
Shy
hesitant
away
on
from
that.
that.
Yeah, the Socrates and Plato kind of like that respect of what he talks about. Am I in the cave? I guess Plato was saying, I think in the end, that the goal of philosophers is to like
Get out of the cave.
get out of the cave, and to
Yeah.
like go to the truth of goodness and truth and knowledge that is outside the one sort of.
Because he would posit perhaps that the cave would be a Greek cave or an Athenian cave, and then a Spartan cave and a Persian cave.
Yeah, but
Because
I guess
the differences in those societies would be the confines. Do you know what I mean? Like as the limitations on men and women in different parts of the world would be, it'd be different. So each civilization had its own cave. It wasn't like one, in my understanding, it wasn't one universal cave that we're trying to get out of.
Yeah, I can get that. I think
because it would be like life in Athens was much different to life in Sparta, which is they're two obviously famous Greek cities, and it seems to me anyway that would be what he's suggesting, to get out and to sort of unshackle yourself from the burden of your culture and see the truth maybe. And you might at a very shallow or surface level read Greek history and go, oh, women couldn't vote, say. Maybe outside of the cave you look at that and objectively go, that's a bit weird that we have no voting rights for women or something to that effect. That's a very easy thing to pick up quickly.
Yeah.
But perhaps in the cave that looks very normal, it's very accepted, but there's no reason that you can think of to challenge it because you're in the cave. Your entire ideology is molded by the shadows on the wall, as opposed to you see the light and you go, well, this kind of, women might have some value.
No, I agree with that. I think
effect, yeah.
Depends if you think it's the same cave, different cave, or is it different shackles, or is it a different manipulator, a different fire? I definitely think it's different things, like, changing your thing. But I think Plato's idea was the outside of the cave was the same. You'd all like there is a pure
way to
truth.
live,
Like if we all exited, I'd be like, oh, there's my mates from Athens exiting a different cave. They must be philosophers
the same
also.
cave system, different entrances, different exits. Right.
But it could be. It's different for you, definitely. All of the experiences within the cave. But once you leave, for him, I'm pretty sure there was like a number one goal. Like there was truth and a source of a form of goodness that existed somewhere. You need to attain.
Like an
philosophers,
objective goodness, an objective good time that we should all be aiming for.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
I think, for sure. I think a lot of people in the Middle Ages who read a lot of him thought that was God, and you can interpret that that way. It kind of is if you read it a little bit.
I mean, you could definitely think that. The analogy just goes, well, that's heaven. You work your life trying to get out of the cave, and you could summarize, or at least I like to summarize, Catholicism as truth and beauty. And the closer you are to both, the closer you are to God. And as we kind of move further away from truth and beauty, it's an ugly nonsense out there sometimes. So you would think, okay, well, if that is the end goal, is God the sun perhaps too bright to look at directly, and we can only comprehend the shadows? Our mere mortal human nature is not capable of understanding such magnitudes.
And I think he says a bit of that, like if you were to be taken out of the cave, you'd be kicking and screaming, and you'd hate it, and you'd be like, what is this nonsense that's blinding me? I think he says that in the allegory, something like that. And I guess in that part, I always think it's like a bit of a analogy to be like someone who is brainwashed or something. It's a good example. Someone who's brainwashed and they took him out of a cult. They'd be kicking and screaming, being like, get away from me, you heathens. And you'd take them to the outside and be like, you have been ruined. This is actually what's happening. And they'd be like, oh,
wow,
fair enough.
Good Lord. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's it. Look, just a quick segue on that, because I've spoken to a few friends. I don't know if I've spoken to you about this, certainly not recently. In the news, I think it was on Joe Rogan. That's the news for me, by the way. That's the Joe. I don't have a TV, social media so it's just now, isn't it? I'm just listening to a bit of Joe Rogan. He had someone on talking about the lost tribes.
Oh, that's
and
right.
Uncontacted peoples. Yeah, the news. I don't know if someone died recently or what happened. They went to this island off the coast of India, I believe, and this kind of young fellow from America got basically speared. Yeah, I don't know how he died. It was not obviously not good, but there are obviously uncontacted tribes throughout the world, and most
Is it that same tribe that would?
I think so.
Yeah, the one
I
with
think
you're not allowed
yeah.
to go. It's illegal.
Yeah, I think the Indian
And he
government's
wanted
like,
to-
maybe we should
yeah.
not, because it's probably scary to them, being that they're so isolated. To me, and maybe it's the papist nature in me, I think we should definitely be over there, looking to baptize and bring them to
Well,
the
that's what
fullness
the guy
of
was doing, wasn't he?
Yeah, probably.
He was a Christian missionary
probably,
of some sort.
Yeah, probably some heretic. But we've got to get over there and bring them into the church. But not even just as an aside, isn't it the most compassionate thing to do, or the most human thing to do would be like, hey, there is a wider world that we have all benefited greatly from trading ideas and materials with different people. And one of the reasons, certainly posited by many a historian, I think off the top of my head, I think Will Durant and Rodney Stark certainly mentioned one of the main reasons for look at where the sort of big civilizational spikes and jumps occurred. There are lots of other different civilizations that they run into and have to trade with, have to deal with, and they build these sophisticated forms of government and weapons and art and culture to both distinguish themselves, to export and to import and exchange and receive those ideas. So maybe when you are isolated, it's very, very difficult to, come up with the Sistine Chapel if you're on an island literally by yourself. It's very, very hard, because we know, certainly as Catholics, we are building, the faith it didn't reach its height in the 3rd century, but it's built on the backs of great men, and we continue to sort of add to that tradition, and we hold true to this, but we learning more all the time and trying to take those teachings and adapt them to the sort of modern world and the modern challenges perhaps. But when you're isolated, it is very hard to do that. It's hard to make any advancements in civilization, because if I'm living next to you and you pull up with a wheel and I see that, I'm like, hey, that looks pretty cool. Could you tell me about it? And then we can share those ideas. This is what I use the wheel for. I can move all these rocks from down here, and I can build this, and I do this, and that's how typically things develop and grow over time.
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree. An isolationist place is not going to go anywhere. There's no way you can do it.
No,
I mean,
it's not.
you're the smartest man in the
There's not a lot
world.
of people. Yeah, it's not like there's a thriving metropolis. It's like 200 people.
Oh, is it?
It's very, very, it's quite relative. Again, they don't practice agriculture on the islands. They're hunter-gatherer type tribal. And then I think the government, from what I watched on Rogan anyway, was certainly the government would send them sort of supplies every now and then and try to make contact. Anthropologists want to get in there and check it out and find out what's going on, which is all well and good. But there is, to me, and maybe it's, I'm coming at it from a very kind of Christian Catholic idea that we should be bringing people into the faith and to your point, bringing them out of the cave, maybe one step at a time. But hey, there's actually a much wider world here. We don't necessarily need you to give up your history and traditions, but there is other things that might make your lives much better. Things that can make their life worse too. I'm not going to pretend that it's all positive, but to leave them in a state of, perpetual Neolithic technology seems almost, in a way, kind of cruel. That we turn our back on them and say, well, no, actually, they're in a way not worthy of our human interaction. When I think it's very human to want to go, hey, we should bring them in and talk to them about what the world is, because they, like it or not, they live in the world. Even if they are an isolated island people, they are a member of planet Earth, and they have probably a place to offer. They might have some ideas. They might have some cool stuff. We don't know. Probably not as much as we're going to give them. It's probably a bit more of a give take, but certainly that's just my feeling on it. Is these people shouldn't be forcibly removed and put into schools, but they should definitely know, I think, that the world exists beyond their little island.
Well, there has to be someone on that island who's hang on, because
You would think so,
they have to. I don't know.
Because I think there's been a drone take photos of once, and they're firing arrows. I saw an image on.
Yeah, there's a helicopter or something.
That would rock your world if you're a little, you've got your stone idol, and all of a sudden some thunderous attack chopper flies overhead. You go, okay, hang on a second.
It just has to be some god.
Is this the end?
Yeah.
Is this
But they're
over?
fired upon it, so they must be pretty
aggressive.
I don't know. Like,
Look,
do you
that's
fire
that.
upon God? Like, if they said like a thing
Maybe
comes
some
out of the
demon.
sky, I mean, I guess people who know alien abductions do shoot the
Well,
aircraft. I guess that's a good.
you definitely go down swinging. Like if you thought it was the end days, you're not going to sit there and be like, oh, well, I guess this is it. You're gonna,
Yeah.
you know,
True.
it's like the manly thing to do is to go down, at least have a crack.
Fight or flight. I think I didn't think about that in
No, I
example of
just
the
came to
cave,
it
but
just
that,
being-
yeah, that's kind of interesting. I think it's eventual, it's inevitable that something will happen, and they'll have to get off the island, or someone will have to go there. It just will happen. Like if they're
Yeah.
all, imagine if they all died. Could we just sit there and watch them all die? Like if we all knew they had like polio or something.
Yeah, I think certainly. Or even if we knew by tracking the resources, like, hey, they're actually like the Easter Islands, like they're
Yeah.
going to extend beyond what their island is capable of producing.
Yeah.
And they're going to starve and die.
Yeah, I think we'd
I
probably.
think people would say, we've got to go over
yeah.
now. But what is that? And this might be, again, I'm biased. I recognize that, but it just seems like we're keeping them in this primitive state, kind of like as a nice thing that we can all watch from the comfort of our modern appliances and amenities. Oh yes, darling, did you see the people of this island off India? Oh yes, they're running around naked, and it just seems wrong. Like that we're almost, the old days with people in zoos. Yeah, this is like a
Right.
long, very weirdly specific time where you get like a person from the East Asia, and they'd be like, people would come and look at them, go, oh, look at this guy in a
Right.
zoo, or like a black person in America in the North would be kind of put in behind glass, and people, oh, look at this,
Right.
this is interesting. Like that, to me, that kind of, it has it elicits the same kind of emotional response to me. I'm like, why
Right.
are we not doing more for them? And why do we have to wait for some calamity to befall them to sort of just reach out and go, hey, let's just help them out, leave them there, maybe have a bridge, maybe have some kind of like communication. What should we be doing? And I guess obviously it's complicated. That's one specific tribe, but there's obviously others around the world. But it just strikes me as weird that we're going like, no, leave them to wallow in. And they obviously, at least some of them know that there's something out there, and we're just like, here's, just dangle the carrot, like, oh, I'm just joking. You don't get
Yeah.
to see what's going on up here. But now, like, your civilization has effectively, there's like a hole in the ceiling of the cave. They've just cracked it open, like, surprise, see
Yeah.
ya. Good
Well,
luck with everything else.
I guess the first thought of I would feel like their culture, I don't know anything about them, would have to have
Neither do I.
would have to have some facet to it that would stop people questioning too much. Otherwise, like, usually with these things, when something like that, there's a cultural belief or assumption that probably if someone's like, hey, what's that like shipping boat that goes by every day at 12, that ginormous thing out there that's moving, like it's an island. Should we question? I imagine someone maybe in the tribe or the people who run it.
Donk
Like,
them on the back.
none of
man.
that. Like,
Get
that's no
outta here.
good. Or they're obviously not building boats or anything. Maybe they don't have the trees for it. I don't know. But there has to be something where it's like, we're not going anywhere. Like, it's cool to stay here. Maybe out the sea is the devil or something. Because otherwise, you'd think that over
See, it's definitely
one
scary.
person out of like 20 generations would be like, I'm gonna build a boat and like, let's have a look.
Get outta here.
Eventually. But I mean, what you're saying, I don't think it'd be super moral to be like watching them. I don't think we're watching them though. I think we're like just.
Oh, no, I
letting
don't
them
mean like
fully
there's a
be.
24-hour camera, but
Yeah.
I know that, like if like you, I don't know if you've ever had a pet or an ant farm or any kind of these sort of, and again, this probably maybe sounds horrible, but if you have an ant farm, you're not looking at it every day, but it's there, and the ants are kind of in the enclosure,
Yeah.
building, toiling, whatever. It just seems a little bit like that. It's not like anyone doesn't know that they are there, and even though they're not being, we're not watching them to my knowledge 24/7, but the Indian government, I'm fairly certain, does have routine kind of checks, make sure no one goes over there.
Yeah.
So they know that they're there, and they probably monitor them in some way. To your point about, well, if they are going to die, we're going to intervene. If they have something happens, someone will know about it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think it's a fair assumption to make. If some calamity befalls these people, somebody in the civilized world will know about that and will probably want to intervene. So that to me seems like, it just seems gross. I don't know. Maybe it's just,
Yeah, I know what
it
you
just
mean.
seems a bit gross to me. I don't like it. And again, like I'm an artsy kind of guy. I like the exchange of ideas. I think some ideas are better than others. And I think, hey, maybe, we give these guys some of the good ideas, and they might have some insights potentially. It's probably too arrogant to assume that there's nothing of value to gain from them, even though I think most of it would be fairly charitable from us to them. Our ideas are clearly, at the very least, very productive and very efficient. And I just think it would be probably to the benefit of everybody if we had more, more voices at the table, more people to go around. I think is generally better. And for those people that like the diversity stuff, like this is real diversity. This is a genuinely diverse group of people, different ideas, different beliefs. Maybe that would be
Yeah, I know what you
there's
mean.
some value there that we haven't been thinking of.
Well, I think there's an assumption that we're going to bring value to them. I think that's like the secret assumption that maybe they're like,
a
no.
fair assumption to make.
But maybe they don't want. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I think if they come off the island, we're like, we'll go and greet them if they come off, but they're not coming off, so we're not going to go in there and like push anything on them if they don't want it. Because I think people have gone many times and they've just like killed them. So
there wasn't. I think there was. I mean, there has been an anthropologist there for a little while.
Was there?
Yeah,
They didn't kill that dude.
Well, because there was some. From what I read briefly, there was some regular supply, like bananas and things that would be given there, and there was some slow contact, and something happened, obviously, and they got a bit defensive. There might have been some misunderstanding. And again, there's a completely unique language. It's not like
Well, does anyone speak any of that?
look,
Probably
I
not.
don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how anthropologists are able to make contact with these tribes in the first place. But obviously, throughout history, this has happened many, many, many times. Which is extremely fascinating to me from a human level. Like to go to someone you have, first of all, we have no idea if they're friendly, if they're willing to converse with you in the first place, and you have no way of conversing at all. So, like different cultural backgrounds, you could take offense to things that they do and vice versa, and not mean it, and that could definitely put a real stress on the relationship. But it does seem to me interesting at the very least. It's an interesting quandary. Like, why is that?
It is interesting.
Why are we doing that? Why is that happening? And is that the right thing to be doing? And are we justifying it in a way to make us feel better by throwing up these kind of, well, they don't want it. Well, hang on, they've been isolated for a very, very long time. It's like, to me, do people who are not, able to consent for something, or they're too young to understand getting a tattoo, but we could probably say like, maybe don't get your face tattooed as a 9-year-old because that would be bad, but you don't have the wisdom or the maturity to understand why that would be bad. And perhaps if they have been isolated for so long, to your point, there's no one there that knows of the outside world, and it might just be perceived as danger. Wherein, in actual fact, it's not necessarily a dangerous place, or we don't necessarily want to, eradicate their culture and tradition as much as we want to expand their horizon and welcome them into the kind of larger world.
I know, it's a funny one. Like there's an assumption in the background there, though. Like I feel like we're introducing our stuff to them, and I think the moral thing is like, we're probably going to talk about this later, but like I think the deal is like, do you do something or nothing? And I think we've chosen to do nothing because otherwise, either way would be influencing them, and we don't know if it's for the good or the bad. Like they might be like, get stuff, we don't want to talk to you. I guess it's like any country though. Like if you're
But we
Greece
do
and you want to go to some random country at any point during history, no one's in Greece being like, well, that country over there, we don't like know what they're doing and they're pretty isolated, should we go over there? And if you go over there, they go, no, go away. I think then if that's the case, then you just don't go there.
Them, I think.
Well, yeah, you conquer them,
days.
I suppose.
There is, though, to your point, there is modern nations do, certainly in the West, and we can get into, what that is probably in a future episode because it's quite large to unpack, and this is kind of a segue that we've already jumped on.
It's a fat segue.
But you could think like there are many African nations that don't want to do certain things that in the West we would consider the right thing to do. So
and vice versa,
and certainly vice versa. So we certainly push our morals and our ideals on these people, but there's something special about people who have never, I guess, joined the world stage that we suddenly think they have a right to their own culture and their privacy. But if you are Nigeria, and you're like, this is how we do it over here. They're like, whoa, hang on, mate. Let me tell you about how we do it in the Upper East Side. What do you think about that? Do you know what I mean? They're like, we don't want that. We're not that big into Broadway. Leave us alone.
Yeah.
So I don't, it's just many layers to it, which I find fascinating. And again, this is a real segue to
it's a real segue. It's a really, actually, I don't know where I stand on any of that morally or whatever. Because, I mean, on the world stage, when you're on the world stage, if a country is somewhere just like genociding its people, the rest of the world goes, oh yeah, none of that. But because we don't know anything about this specific nation, I'm gonna call them, I guess, we don't know what they're doing.
Generous.
Yeah, like they could be doing anything there, and we're just gonna like let it roll us. But it's interesting, like how that works. Who has the right to really dictate anything?
Well, he who carries the biggest stick.
I guess that's true.
Would be the
But
it's
again,
like the old meme.
which nation goes in? It would be India because they own the island. I suppose.
It's India's. Yeah, it's definitely.
So it'd be India introducing
internationally recognized
something.
as Indian territory. Yeah. Okay.
But would to be fair, would you have a representative of every nation and be like, these are the ideas of the world? Choose your battle.
Choose your battle. I'm not sure. I guess maybe we'll come back to that in a future episode because it is quite a. I guess it's a real. That we could go on for a long time. I think. I'm not sure if we're going to make much headway, given that we just pulled it out of the blue.
You want to sum up? Well, we'll go back to the cave, maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah. I mean. The cave to me...
Leave them in the cave. That's the entire point of the cave is to get out, except if you're really deep inside. Then you get to stay there. And it's better for you. That seems antithetical to what we're talking about.
So far in the cave, you need to be rescued or something. I don't know.
You love the shadows. Stay there, enjoy the shadow. Okay, all right.
Yeah. I mean
obviously... The world is complex. All art is but nature unknown to thee or something to that. Or all nature is but art unknown to thee. So I don't know. Maybe there's something to that. I'm not sure, but
I think I like the cave in general. I think it really speaks to me the fact that you can't know everything, and in reality, you're kind of are mystified by your own shadows, and you are biased by your culture, and you are biased by everything that's around you. You can't get around it. It's very difficult.
No, it's impossible to get around it. And I know I've got some notes, and we've spoken about in the past. Which I think will be really interesting, the difference between culture and ethnicity and nationhood and how those ideas all interact together and partly where we are and how we compartmentalize those differences and try to make them the same, because there is a difference between culture and nationality and ethnicity
100%.
And how they interact with one another is quite interesting. So,
and they're being tested, it seems,
very much
in the last 10 years,
topical,
more than ever. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get a little bit. So I guess to summarize, we're both in the cave, and we want to.
We're in the cave. Okay. The only thing is, Plato is a little bit
loves himself,
elitist-ish and ideological, and so like he's trying to say he's out of the cave because he's a philosopher, which I don't know if I agree with. Like someone who's out of the cave doesn't necessarily have to be a philosopher or anything.
Pretty sure if you read Plato, you do.
Yeah, that's true. That you do.
In fact, if you want to be cool, according to Plato, you have to be Plato. Plato adjacent. Yes, I'm very much like you.
And when I think about this stuff too much, there is a like when you do too much of this specific type of philosophy, there is a bit of a like. You get into a hole where you question too much, and I think it's like counterproductive. And this is where it all begins in the cave. You go, everything is the shadow. F this is nonsense.
Well, I've read a little bit of Rene Descartes and his ideas on, I don't know if it was metaphysics or something to that effect, about like what can you believe, and it just kind of it didn't interest me much because I'm like, well, hang on, there has to be a base from which I can operate. Otherwise, I don't have my life to dedicate to like, are my eyes really seeing this right now? Is this real?
There's some answers to that stuff. That's like pretty interesting.
For sure. But it didn't interest me as much as maybe the cave. So, all right, we'll move on a little bit lighter. Types of genius, natural talent versus training and dedication. And this is a very interesting topic because I think it bleeds into our next episode very, very well. But what is the difference between a natural talent and training hard and working at a craft, and what's more impressive, or what is there a difference between greatness and best? I guess so. As a quick example, I'm a big fan of playing chess. A natural talent at chess, I think that jumps to my mind is Jose Ruel Capablanca, who was a world chess champion and by all accounts just saw the game and didn't need to spend you know, hours and hours a day, which I'm sure he did, but didn't necessarily spend as much time training and practicing because he just saw the game and had that kind of gift, versus some of the modern players who, you know, their entire job is chess. And I think Capablanca was actually the US ambassador for Cuba or something, or the Cuban ambassador. He was. Okay. He had like another like full career, which is reminiscent of most men, or most people, I should probably say, 100 years ago or so. They weren't quite so specialized. They did more than one thing. So yeah, I'm not sure what's more impressive to you, and what sort of where's the marker, the delineation between the two in your mind?
This is super interesting, and I think it's really complicated to answer. Actually, it's like different. Look, I guess we said this about this last podcast, but the different types of intelligence, I think, would be differently affected by training versus talent, or I guess grit versus talent. I guess physical ability is pretty talent based. There's only so much you can train if you're just not 6'7". You can't do certain things. Yeah, like there's a limit. However, if you are 6'7", does not guarantee anything. Even if you are naturally talented, if you don't train, you won't make it. But it's a funny one. I guess like natural talent, if you have intellectually, I'm just going to go with that one.
Yep.
I guess you talk intelligence is like the ability or the speed to process information. That's kind of a natural talent. I don't know how much you can speed that up to a certain point. Like someone who's naturally intelligent has like extraordinary abilities to process information and to solve certain problems. However, you can train yourself and the pathways to do it faster when similar problems arise. My point being, if someone's like a super genius, all the training in the world isn't probably going to make you as good as them in their chosen field. However, I think training and dedication probably trumps natural talent in pretty much 90% of the examples I could think of. Yeah.
Well, I often say that when you get guys like LeBron James or Michael Jordan, as a very easy example, or Magnus Carlsen for that matter, there is an element of hard work, dedication that meets that natural talent, which is almost unfair because you just can't. You can't
beat him.
That.
No, I'm not going to be able to beat any. LeBron when he was 14, I couldn't beat.
That's because he was probably still 7 inches tall. He's 7 inches and 50 pounds.
Yeah, that's it.
Would have beat the shit out of you. Yeah. So no, that's because that is. There are some people born, it seems, to do certain things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Michael Phelps. If you're supposedly
like
looking at
fish.
I think his arm length is like 30% more than the average humans, depending to his height, and he's got short legs, which means he's got more buoyant middle, which makes him float better. And he's also got some sort of, I think, ADHD, which he said gave him ridiculous amounts of energy. He could train more than everyone else, and he was very hyper focused on specific things, and so he's got all these things working for him. If he didn't look like that,
if he wasn't Michael Phelps,
to be fair, he did get beaten at the first Olympics, which was like 2000 or 2004. He came like third.
Yeah, no, what a loser.
Yeah, so he did train. There's training involved.
Came third in the world. Oh, what a piece of crap that guy was.
No, but
and then went on to win everything and break every record.
Yeah, that's it.
Like I when I did the Army Reserves, one of the guys there was on the Australian team. Didn't make it, but he was on the sort of the broader Australian team for swimming. And we're talking a bit about the mentality and what kind of energy and diet and training. He's like, it's really annoying because there'd be articles where occasionally Michael Phelps would like have a Big Mac or something, and then people would be like, "Well, why can't we have a Big Mac?" And they go, "Well, because you're not Michael Phelps. I guess you're not 6'5" with a 6'7" wingspan and just genetically blessed to do whatever you want. You need to stick to the diet and the regiment, and then maybe you can sniff like the backup spot on the Australian team." So it does seem like it. I guess it does seem like some people really are born with a talent that kind of takes them a long way. And obviously, I don't think Michael Phelps would be Michael Phelps if he didn't work hard.
You have to work hard.
You have to work hard. But
I mean, swimming and running are way more physical attributes, though, than ball sports. Like, if you're Don Bradman, that dude effectively looked like everybody else. I don't think he had any...
the greatest athlete of all time.
Yeah.
I think because he was... I think they saw... I saw a really interesting... And I'm not a massive cricket guy.
No, neither.
But I think it's hard to make an argument there is an athlete better or so much better than his contemporaries. Like on the chart, on like a simple XY chart, he sits just ridiculously in the top right quadrant.
Yeah,
There's no one else there. Yeah, he's mathematically just multiple times better than anybody else.
I think they don't do this much anymore, but I remember maths in school. They used to be like, you can actually chart it, standard deviations.
Yes, yeah.
He's like this many standard deviations above any contemporary.
And even the modern
time.
people with better bats, better. Like I think one of the things my granddad told me, and he would just die on this hill. He's like, the pitch wasn't that great back then. Like it wasn't like it was bulldozed perfect. There's holes in it, and
it looked garbage.
Yeah, it did look garbage. Apparently, that last ball where he got done for a duck, and he needed one run to average 100, which is insane. Just
that's right, and he got zero.
Got a duck, and then the bowler, I think it was an Englishman or maybe it was Sri Lanka, I'm not sure, but it was almost crying in his arms. Like, I'm so sorry. Like we all kind of, when you're around such greatness, you kind of root on greatness.
Yeah.
And obviously he was a gentleman, so he wasn't.
No, he was a very good sportsman.
Just incredible, bit of a dodgy pitch, I've been told, reliably told it was a piece of crap pitch. And, probably raining and some other conditions, and the bats weren't as good, and none of the equipment was as good. But yet he was an unbelievable athlete, I suppose.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting way that the word athlete has evolved too, because I would think being several standard deviations better than everybody else that you ever went up against would definitely put you on a short list of greatest athletes ever. But you probably, if you just saw him walking past you in the street, you wouldn't be like, that guy.
No, he's not a super tall dude,
athlete.
not super athletic. But cricket's a funny one. You can kind of be, I think it's a hand-eye coordination thing. You can kind of be Steve, what's his name? Gosh, I've run out of the guy.
Steve Warren.
Yes, Shane Warne. What am I talking about? Just Shane Warne. And he's eating pies, smoking durries. He doesn't need to have any aerobic abilities, but he's got amazingly gained skill where he can flick his wrist at the speed of bullets. And he's got some very specific abilities there that he's trained up. He did a lot of training too. This is just repetitive,
himself.
Crazy stuff. Yeah, maximum one ability, none of the other ones.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Okay. Fair enough. Well, that's good.
I was going to go back to I remember in uni we did like a communications world culture thing to do with my philosophy, and they always, you would have done it in business actually. They do like Eastern versus Western approaches to stuff, and they go like Western is more singular and individualized, and the Eastern's more communal and collective thinking.
They did that with the male-female paradigm too.
Did they?
Yeah. I guess probably something to do with like the West. You could say certainly a stronger patriarchy would be the argument in the West.
Right.
But I don't know how I feel about that, because it certainly wasn't exactly a matriarchy over in the East. It was certainly, and again, I can't say for sure. I've done a couple of semesters of sort of ancient China and a few other subjects at university, and read a few books, but it's not something that I think part of the difference is it's so foreign to me, and part of that foreignness makes it less interesting. It's harder for me to engage with, because it's just not who I am. It's no,
right.
There's interest in it, but it doesn't call to me the way that the history of Bavaria would call to me. Oh, right. It's very interesting. Like I see my ancestors in this. I see the traditions and history that I can see myself a part of, and see the remnants of that now. In the East, it's the language, the root language is different. The way they organize society different. Like it's so foreign that it's more of a, to me anyway, it's akin to an alien race essentially. Like, oh, that's very interesting. Respect for what you're doing, but it just seems so different to what I'm doing that I can't engage with it the same way.
Yeah, I would agree in part. I think the stuff I've read is just bad. Like the stuff I've read is just not good at summarizing things from, because at university we did very little anything that wasn't directly European or American. So the stuff that we did do was so small, and I just don't think it was very good. Like that, whatever we were reading, the person they had chosen, I was like, I don't know what this is. And I think in order for me to understand exactly what you said, I actually need a whole list of assumptions and background beliefs of why this is.
Culture,
yeah, I'm like, I understand you're saying this, but what is this? Like, what does this come from? Is this the government saying? Like, there's so much I don't understand that it's really hard to be like, this one piece of philosophical text, like what's the background for this? Like why are we actually doing that? And that I think the writing's really bad at summarizing the underlying beliefs and assumptions. Do you know what I mean?
It's difficult, isn't it? I mean, when you study Plato, we kind of descend from the same cultural lineage. So what he's talking about makes a lot of sense to us conceptually because we live it, we see it, and we interact with it every day. Even if it's subconscious, we have, what they say, Western civilization is Greek reason, Roman law, Catholic faith, as a very quick summarization of what our sort of history is, and that is European. I know you're probably looks of you certainly Northern European, Viking, something like that. So there is an element of we've spent hundreds and hundreds of years in a certain worldview, and then when we do see something different, there's too many assumptions that we do not have, or that we would turn left when they would perhaps turn right, and we don't have that ingrained in us. So when we read it, it's very foreign and hard to comprehend. And there's parts of that too when you read sort of German philosophy or Spanish. Like,
it's unreadable.
If you read different types of philosophy from different cultures, it can be really difficult to get your head around. Like, what are you actually talking about?
Yeah.
Because we don't experience that to the same extent today, because there is there's a vast difference between 18th century German culture and 2024 Australia.
It's not as vast as though like
no, but
East
exactly
West,
like that.
yeah.
That sort of chasm is still rooted in the same, Arabic numeral, Latin underpinning kind of Western, big quote Western civilization umbrella. And then when you look at a lot of Eastern stuff, it's very much a completely different ballgame. It's very difficult to. I'm not sure how anyone ever did, but how do you go from Arabic numerals to like, what is that? I can't, there's no commonality. Because when you look at the German alphabet and the French, like the characters, you can read them, even if you don't understand what you still recognize them. Yeah. But it's unrecognizable. Like a Japanese writing is not recognizable as anything to me. It doesn't look like I couldn't guess. Like if my life depended on it, I couldn't guess. But do you know what I mean? Like if you had to make a guess with the French, like the French alphabet, I think it has 24.
Oh,
letters.
really?
Yeah. Okay. Somewhere around there. Similar, and like the characters are very similar, and you'd be wrong a lot too, but you'd probably guess a bit more because you could at least look at it and go, I kind of think I know what that is, even if you can't pronounce it or...
No, I think that's actually when we're talking about this, I actually thought about the German thing. It came to my mind because it's exactly the same. When you're reading that, it's almost like they should have at the beginning given you a set of glossary, because you read some German stuff and number one, it's been ruined a little bit in the translation.
Oh, yes.
So, and you don't know, like you're using this word, but that doesn't mean that in German. So number one, you're stuffed there. And that's even worse when you go to like languages from a further place away. And number two, when the philosophers, especially Germans, tend to use their own words. Like they'll be talking, and when let's say they're using the word blue, they actually don't mean blue. They haven't told you, but halfway through you've got to get that they actually mean bluish green. And you're like, okay. So there was a famous, a few of them actually, but a famous few German philosophers that wrote something. Mm-hmm. A whole bunch of contemporaries came out, reviewed it. And then that philosopher was like, you literally got the exact wrong. It was exactly the opposite of what I was trying to say. Like I think Wittgenstein brought out something and he was saying, world is this. And they were like, I'll write a whole essay on this. All their essays got released. And he was like, you're actually saying the exact opposite of what I was trying to say. It's that ridiculous. And I guess when you're going through, you need a glossary. Like if I'm looking at, and they're using an analogy of a tiger running up a tree or something, I need to know the background of what they're talking about when they mean tiger, the historical context of where that comes from. But you don't get it. You just read the whole thing and go, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. This is nonsense.
Well, yeah, exactly. You can't. Culturally, it's different. I think even simplifying East and West, I believe the East is a much more top-down approach to life. From the emperor, the kings, they go down to the peasants, whereas the West is much more from the bottom up.
Well, I see. I don't even know.
See,
Is it?
yeah, or that's what I was. That's what I was told at university.
Yeah,
But
okay.
that was the basic gist of it. It's like it's just very different. And I remember I was talking to one of my mates, and he's like, "Oh, we should do more, like medieval Chinese stuff." I'm like, "That sounds cool, but I don't know. I don't know anything about it." Neither do you. He's like, "Yeah, but we do so much of this." I'm like, "Yeah, it's because we all have a sense of that. We all have a feel for it.
It's also been done by all the academics over the last 100 years. You didn't have to get like a whole bunch of people to do it.
Well, you
I'm
just
not
need
going
to
to do
know
it.
so much. Like you just honestly have to. You couldn't drop you and I into a Chinese philosophy course now. We have no idea. You have no idea what's going on.
No, 100%.
You have to go in and understand the culture and the history of China to understand the philosophy that we're trying to get our heads around. And I think that's probably, well, again, that's what makes philosophy so interesting to me is, okay, well, what is actually going on here?